Well, between Erebus and Rossi and Gary and Deju, that's quite an introduction. We could almost go home right now. But thank you for staying. Now, anytime someone says to you, pay attention, it does grab your attention. I mean, it's kind of like we speak with children or maybe students. Or it might be words that we snarl under our breath against the driver in the car ahead of us when they're acting inattentive. But seldom do we hear the words pay attention, and then they're followed by the words that Deju read. Pay attention, you wealthy people. Whoa. Okay, you're getting really personal. I mean, what makes you think I'm wealthy? I have never discussed my financial status with you. And besides that, why would I pay attention to you? Why do I owe you that? Wealth equals power. Power equals, I don't need to follow your rules. Maybe I don't need to follow any rules. Thank you, Gary. Certainly, I do not need to reply to your demand for attention. We see this attitude played out on the national scene over and over and over again. Pay attention, you wealthy people. That is the beginning of this text. But so before you shrug your shoulders and say, this doesn't have anything to say with me, to me because I am not the target audience, let's just consider two things. Wealth is a relative term, as you know. There will always be people who are less wealthy than we are. And secondly, maybe more importantly, we can always learn something from a general principle, even when the group that is being addressed does not include us. We live in an environment where wealth matters. In fact, people strive for wealth every day. And yet, the United States has one of the world's largest pay gaps, with CEOs earning nearly 300 times what the average worker earns. These are statistics from Patricia Cohen's 2015 New York Times article. Also in 2015, a maverick CEO in the Seattle area began paying every employee, even entry-level employees, $70,000 a year. Now that was 7 years ago. Why did he do that? Because he listened. He overheard his employees talking about how difficult it was to actually make a living with what he was paying them in their high-priced environment. He was paying attention, and that put him ahead of the pack. But those are not examples where most of us live and work and study. So let's bring it closer to home. California, one of the top 10 agricultural producing states in the Union, implemented changes for farm workers who are among the most overworked and underpaid workers in the state. According to the California Department of Industrial Relations, as of January 1, 2022, farm workers who work for employees with over 26 employees began receiving overtime pay for hours, 8 hours in a day, or 40 hours in a week. And beginning January 1st, 2025, this benefit will be extended to all agricultural workers, regardless of the size of the operation. This is a fundamental change for some of our essential workers. This is an issue of existential equity for tens of thousands of workers in our communities. There's a lot to be gleaned from both the New York Times reference and the worker condition in the fields right near to us in the San Joaquin Valley. Closing the wealth-poverty gap is controversial, and it is not without difficulties. But our neighbors' cries from the fields have needed addressing for a long, long time. Pay attention, you wealthy folks, or those of you who work for wealthy corporations or entities. The phenomenon of exploitation is not new. In fact, Jesus said, the poor you will always have with you, but not meaning, don't worry about it, you can't do anything, but rather to say, this is going to be something that needs your attention and your concern for a very long time. When the writer of the book of James wrote to his far-flung Jewish audience sometime during the 1st century CE, inequity was already a reality. Why else would the writer launch into this impassioned discourse about wealth and the impact that injustice has on those in poverty, including their very own employees? It's hard for justice to gain a foothold, and even more difficult for it to stick over time. Whether that's racial justice, economic justice, climate justice, gender justice, any push toward equity is met with enormous backlash. We have many current reminders that disregard and inequity seem to be baked into the system. We as people are called to attention. As this text illustrates, the very thing that we so frequently place our trust in is far from secure. Wealth is temporary. Destructive forces beyond our control are at work. Rot, moths, rust, as it states in our text, and in our world we would say wealth is subject to theft and breakdown of all kinds, including stock market fluctuations, environmental upheavals, war, and so many other things. Even our retirement portfolios are precarious. It seems from the progression of this text that the crumbling of riches and comfort is somehow tied to the misfortune that the wealthy have brought upon those whom they actually could have helped. There's a connection there. Listen. Hear the cries of the wages of your field hands. These are the wages you stole from those who harvested your fields. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the God who hears. The people of wealth have not only failed to pay attention, their inattentiveness has led them to become calloused, even ruthless. They're the opposite of empathic, mindful, and humane people. In this text, the wealthy are not primarily called to attention because of their wealth, but because their isolation from anyone in need has eroded their capacity for empathy. When one cannot imagine being in a position other than privilege, the cries of those who are oppressed will reach the ears of a God who hears. Pay attention. Consider. Listen. All of these words are used to shake people from their lethargy. And the writer continues, you have lived self-satisfying lives on this earth, a life of luxury. We almost cringe and we wonder when this diatribe will end. I mean, we would feel uncomfortable, probably defensive, if we get a letter like this. It's quite an indictment. The writer shines a revealing light into the dark places, the places of self-satisfaction, indulgence, injustice, and criminal neglect. Almost as if it's a January 6th committee hearing. Pay attention, consider, listen. Your actions have consequences. Your decisions impact people. Your priorities determine your own long-term well-being. This isn't simply a text or a passage written to the uber rich. The attitudes are universal. Disregard, misplaced priorities, self-centeredness, misplaced trust, apathy, and even carelessness. All of those are portrayed in the picture that is painted in these few lines. This writer, this painter essentially, stays with the painting and holds it up in front of the viewers, along with some warnings, but just holds it there for them to observe. That's where he leaves it. And now it's up to us. We can take it a step further and ask, if a picture is held up for us to consider what we could do differently, what do we do with that? What can we do to change course? How can we avoid this type of destruction and these destructive attitudes, behaviors? How can they be transformed, especially as they impact the vulnerable among us? If we don't find examples of what can be done around us, we set our own direction. We see a vision and begin putting it in place. We move to the head of the pack. According to this text, we're called to attention, notice, listen. How do we do that? It begins with regularly taking inventory. We need this as a nation. We need this as a local community. We need this as a church. And every one of us needs this individually. This inventory will reveal what still serves us and what has run its course. What is beneficial and what has become a weight that drags us down. How our environment, that is our job, our family, our employment, our community, how that environment has changed, and what those changes mean for the community and beyond, including ourselves personally. Practicing attentiveness and mindfulness is a type of prayer. It's good to review our attitudes, our actions, our interactions daily, not overlooking either successes or shortcomings. Both are important components to welcome into our consciousness. The same process can be used in every space in which we move. When we build an impervious layer, protecting us from seeing an unfiltered picture, we're imprisoned. We cannot cultivate what we do not see. We cannot let go of what we refuse to name. A byproduct of an honest inventory is an increase in empathy. A few weeks ago, Rod drew our attention to a focus that he's spearheading at Woodward Park Regional Library called the Empathy Project. The impetus for this project is apparent. Empathy is a much lacking grace in our culture. Simply asking, what's it like to be you, will transform our perceptions and it will ignite empathy within us. This simple question helps us to pay attention, to listen, and to embark on or continue along a pathway toward compassion. Because we generally see very little empathy or compassion, being ahead of the pack will include growing as people of empathy. Another question is, how can we help foster human connection now, right here, in our own community of faith, in our city, in an environment in which we live and work? As we become more attentive, listening, mindful people, we will be alerted to what comes next. The vision will grow out of our transformed ability to think beyond ourselves and beyond what benefits only us and our immediate surroundings. Whom does our community need us to be now? Not 2 years from now, not 5 years ago, but right now. We've all changed in the last 2, 5, 10 years. Some changes feel like improvements. Other changes feel like enormous losses. We can choose to think of the present as different from the past. neither better nor worse, with new opportunities, new challenges, new dreams. May we never outgrow the capacity to dream. Yes, we'll make mistakes. There will be surges forward, and then we will slide back. We will face detractors, those voices both internal and external that will insist, this will never work. You don't know how to do that. You can't do that. Maybe so. But as EJ said in a conversation recently, let's get caught trying. I love that. Well, yes, getting caught trying puts us ahead of the pack. It's not for the sake of being ahead, but when models and precedents for what we envision are lacking, we forge new paths, just like that young CEO in Seattle. If someone comes to you in the coming weeks or months and says, pay attention, listen, consider something, I hope we can receive that without getting our backs up. I also hope that the call will lead us into a fruitful direction. Unlike the call to the wealthy people addressed in our text, I hope the call will not need to point out our self-absorption and the devastating impact on those around us who already suffer. I have no reason to believe that it would include that. But it is good to have an open heart for the truth, to see the whole and the true picture. I urge all of us to take regular inventories, to listen well, to learn from those who carry grace and from those who have a devastating impact on those around us and on those who suffer. I have no reason to believe that we cannot and that we have not and that we will not do that. We need to do whatever it takes to be ahead of the pack, not for the sake of being ahead, but to get caught trying. The world needs us to try. May God help us.